Hello, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar where we will be talking about energy risk in leisure and hospitality. The main concept of this presentation is going to be talking, as I just said, about energy, and we're going to look at how to protect your business from the rising costs. Next slide, Jenny. So, to introduce myself first, my name is Charlie Davies. I'm the Business Development Manager of High Group. My role is primarily around customer engagement and working alongside clients to navigate their ambitions to deliver net zero across their estates. So I work on proposals and facilitate their strategies into a wider project context. And I'll hand it over to my co-host today, Laura Bishop.
Thanks, Charlie. Yes, hello everyone. I'm Laura Bishop. I am the co-founder and one of the directors here at High Group, HI Group. I'm a mechanical engineer background. I've been working in heat pumps, heat networks, decarbonisation projects for about 15 years. Pleased to be on the podcast alongside Charlie, talk about all things energy related. So yeah, looking forward to it.
So as you've been introduced to both of us, let's introduce you to who High Group are. So we are decarbonisation partners. We work primarily within the public sector, but today obviously talking about hospitality and leisure. We are a team of engineers, analysts and project managers, and we deliver end-to-end renewable energy decarbonisation projects. As Laura's just stipulated with her experience, we have decades of experience in energy, sustainability and multi-site operations, a proven track record of delivering award-winning decarbonisation projects, and we are an integrated advisory, design, installation, ongoing support. So we focus on delivering fundable and cost-effective scalable solutions, as said, across multi-site operations, where many buildings will be very diverse and individual in their needs and their ambitions. Next slide, please, Jenny. But we always deliver through our High Group promise. So we always providing the right solutions for our clients and the environment, transcending technological biases and focusing solely on what best achieves sustainable outcomes. So in that encompasses our pillars. We incorporate technology, finance and the environment, and we incorporate all of those into our decision-making designs and route forward for clients. So what we'll cover today, so obviously this is a webinar focused on leisure and hospitality, but what we understand with leisure and hospitality is there is so many different facets that you guys need to think about when you want to reach your decarbonisation ambitions. What we'll be solely focusing on today, though, is our expertise in energy. So we're going to be looking at energy as a business risk, what's driving cost volatility in the market at the moment, simple, quick wins that you can do to reduce costs without capital. Looking into business case preparation, so for larger scale projects of those who want to come off gas. MRV, which is monitoring, reporting and verification of your energy data. And then looking at practical steps you can take today.
So as Charlie's just introduced, we're going to be talking largely about energy in the leisure and hospitality sector. And for everybody across the board, we're now seeing various issues around energy costs, probably more than ever. We're at a really sharp end with this. So first of all, we're seeing cost volatility. Particularly right now, we're seeing energy prices fluctuate. We're seeing them rise, gas and electric prices rising. A lot of that is to do with the fact that we don't have control over our own destiny, basically, our own pricing. So unless you're generating all of your own electricity, you are subject to what your energy supplier is going to sell you gas and electric at. And we are seeing those tariffs tightening up, and those unpredictable operating costs, they're there, whether you're working in hospitality or elsewhere, they're there. And then particularly in the leisure sector, we are seeing these operational exposures. So if you're running a hotel, if you're running a leisure centre, you can't just switch off your hot water, you can't just switch off your swimming pool, your gas boiler for your swimming pool, because you are going to then have impact on your reputation. You know, people saying, oh, you know, getting up in the morning and there's no hot showers, that's not going to be okay in a hotel. And that's the reality of a live environment where you are dealing with high and rising and unpredictable energy costs. And then if in the UK particularly, we have these aging assets, we have buildings which are years old, they've got older heating systems, older cooling systems, they are potentially quite inefficient, so they are consuming more energy than they need to. They're failing more often. They need a lot more maintenance spending on them, and they're not really necessarily designed for where we are today in terms of expected performance and the higher energy costs that we're experiencing. So we talked a little bit about cost volatility there in the last slide, and we talked about a couple of things. So exposure to market price, like I say, if you're not generating your own solar power, if you haven't got your own heat pump, or if you haven't got your own private wire bringing your own electricity in, you are going to be exposed to the market price, whatever supplier is going to be selling you power at or gas at. And this little graph here just shows that the issues that we have in the UK, because we have a very, very high spark gap, and traditionally, historically, we've had the highest spark gap across Europe. And the spark gap is basically the difference in price between electricity and gas. So at the moment, in April 2026, we were running at a spark gap of 4.7, which means that electricity is 4.7 times more expensive than gas, which becomes really important when you're looking at decarbonising. So if you're going to go from a gas boiler to a heat pump, or a gas boiler to an electric boiler, you are going to be spending more on your heating bills, and that's not great. That does not make good economic sense. But there are ways around that, which we're going to explore a little bit more, and it's mainly around generating your own power on site. We've talked about inefficient system performance. So if you're putting gas into a boiler that is running at 60% efficiency, you're going to be losing so much of that gas out of that boiler to make heat. So, by increasing efficiency, by using a more efficient boiler or a heat pump system, you can get more heat out than the power or gas that you're putting in. And then with hotels and leisure centres, we know there's a very high baseline demand. Pools need heating day and night. Hot water needs heating day and night. There's going to be high demand for electric cookers and things like that as well. So you don't have the same kind of, say, off days like at weekends. If you're running a building that is shut at weekends, that's just not apparent in the leisure sector. So it's all kinds of things that are impacting on cost volatility in this sector. So that's what we're going to look at next, as to how we could potentially bring those under control.
Thank you, Laura. So as Laura said, there are two sort of ways, or multiple sort of ways, that we could look at a system, how it operates. Most people, when they think about getting things efficient, is replacing everything. Whereas there are options or routes forward that you can do things on simpler terms. So reducing the cost of your energy bills without expending a huge amount of capital. So areas to focus on this is firstly energy visibility. Can you identify energy waste? Are you able to see, as Laura said, to see the inefficiencies, to see when systems are turning on when they shouldn't be turning on? Are you visible to everything that your data is providing? Reviewing the current system, so your compressors and plant operating schedules, as I've sort of touched on a point then, and then also quick wins, so simple operational improvement with rapid payback potential. Now, most people sort of think these things will be very obvious, but such things as pool covers can provide a huge payback, where you're not having to drive your boilers into overdrive to heat your pools on a daily basis. You're saving energy on simple operational costs. So as a quote from the bottom there, many of the biggest savings come from fixing how systems operate, not replacing them. So I'm going to hand over to Laura, who's going to speak about a real life situation that we have worked on. So Laura, could you explain what the project was initially, and then what was the discovery period to lead into your findings?
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Charlie. So this was a small leisure centre. It's actually a hydrotherapy centre. It's a small swimming pool, some changing rooms, some classrooms, and sort of public areas as well. And the client came to us because they knew that they wanted to put a heat pump in. They wanted to decarbonise. That was their starting point, decarbonising. And they'd already made the decision that they wanted to put a heat pump in. So we were engaged to design the system, get that ready for installation, help them through the tendering process and the installation process. However, when we went to do our initial site survey and baselining our gas and electric, which we'll talk about more actually, about how we go through that process. But when we went there to look at putting the heat pump in, what we actually found was that there was a lot of things that needed to be done within the building that meant that actually forget the heat pump, put that to one side. There was a load of things that needed to be sorted out before that could happen. So we took a step back with the client and said, let's just review how the building's been operated at the moment. So the building had been designed to work with underfloor heating, with the pool heating and some hot water for showers. They were actually finding that the pool could not stay warm. That was the first problem, the first alarm bell. So what they were doing was they were pushing the boiler temperature up and up and up, and it was actually designed to work at 50 degrees. So we're pushing the boiler up, so it was working less efficiently. The underfloor heating was not working as it should do because it was actually running far too hot, and they still weren't getting the pool up to temperature, and they were just putting money towards it to try and work out what was going on, and obviously spending money on the gas boiler. We also found that they had cooling systems in place which were working alongside or against the heating system, so they were both operating, both costing money to run, but actually they were just fighting each other all the time. We found that there had been some manual overrides put in place. The control system wasn't working as designed. So it was all there, ready to be used. It just wasn't working as designed. And they had very poor humidity control, again, linked back to temperatures, which was actually damaging the fabric of the building. So we, as I say, we put the heat pump to one side and just said, let's see what we can do before doing any sort of decarbonisation works. And we actually found two main things. First of all, without wanting to get technical, they had a bypass open in the system, which was instead of heat reaching the pool, it was actually just bypassing and going back to the boilers. So we shut the bypass. That cost next to nothing to do that. And we also helped them to look at putting a pool cover in place, and I think that was about £4,000 spend for a pool cover. Immediately putting those two things in place, the pool was warm. The underfloor heating could be put back to 50 degrees C. So then the boiler was working as it should have been, as it was designed to work. That was basically all those things together achieved 33% reduction in gas consumption. We did not put a heat pump in. We will be putting one in, but minimal spend with a big saving on gas, and also the building is working as it was designed. So there's no more humidity problems, and as I say, the pool's warm, and the building's warm, and the bills are less. So that's exactly how we were able to put that in place without investing a lot of money. So it's a really good example of how you can just go in, spend minimal money, but still make sure your building is more efficient.
So as Laura's discussed there, the minimal investment for quick wins that can dramatically have an impact on your gas consumption and any energy bills straight away. But what we're going to explore next is getting business case ready. So looking at a larger scale installation. So those who have got the ambitions to come off gas, to decarbonize and bring about some energy security on their sites. So we're going to do a real world example here of a site that we've worked with. They're a multi-site operation that have leisure sites across the country, but we've focused on one site in particular. So this site in particular was a 10,000 metre squared leisure and health spa facility that has all the facilities that you would expect, from spas, pools, gym, tennis courts, massage parlours, restaurants, etc. And the list goes on. The site has an ambition to decarbonise all their sites across the country by 2035. And with this site in particular, they already have a 300 kilowatt solar array, but despite that, are still heavily exposed to rising energy costs due to the scale and complexity of its operational demand. So with as you can see on the chart there, the fuel splits is around 33% of electricity and 67% of gas, and they are spending around £600,000 plus on this site alone. And as I said, it's a multi-site operation, so that's across, we're saying to talk 20 to 30 places around the country that will all be in that bracket of energy spend. Next slide, please, Ginny. So I'm going to hand over to Laura. So obviously, like I said, we've got the picture of what the site is, what their ambitions are. Laura, when we've been approached by this site, what is the steps that we would be looking at initially to start getting options off the ground and pathways for them to start decarbonising?
So I think the very first thing to do is to baseline our understanding of the building whether that's one building or a multiple set of buildings on one site. So what we'll do is we'll do a two-pronged attack. We'll do site surveys to just go and look at the plant, look at the equipment, look at how energy is being used across the site, talk to your staff on site and say, right, is everything working well? Where are there problems? Are there cold spots? Going back to the case study we just talked about there, talking to them and saying, we can't get the pool warm, the underfloor heating's too hot. So all those kind of things. So it's sort of the practicality on site, understanding the building. And then we also have a look at historic gas and electric and energy consumption. So we like to try and get at least 12 months worth of monthly bills for gas and electric. This says how the site has been operating to date. Ideally, we'd have things like half-hourly electric and half-hourly gas. That's not always available, but if it is, that makes our lives and our accuracy a lot easier. So what you can see here, this particular site, we were given, fortunately in this case, we were given half-hourly electric and gas for a particular year. We then will normalise that so that we're not just seeing whether this is a cold year or a warm year, and then we graph that out. So the red graph you can see there at the top is their hourly gas consumption, which has been converted into a heat demand. So this is the building with the pool load and the hot water load and the heating load in there. And then the bottom graph there is the green, and that's how they've been using electricity over the course of a year. The great thing about this is that we know that leisure centres have a fairly flat heating profile through the course of a year. So we can just check that there's no anomalies in terms of we expect there to be very high demand and low demand in summer, which is typical for a building without a swimming pool. Or is it a bit more flat? As you can see here, the summer load is not that much less than the winter load in this particular example. We can also spot any anomalies. So say there was some peaks in the middle of summer, we'd be able to ask about them. Why are they there? It might be that that's erroneous data, or it might be that something is actually going on that shouldn't be going on in the middle of the summer or elsewhere. And then the last thing is we can say, right, we can baseline the cost, we can baseline the carbon, we can baseline the kilowatt hours energy for a particular year, and then we can build our solution from that, and we can always go back to, well, the baseline was this, so therefore is it going to cost more or less? We're going to save more or less carbon, and are we going to generate or consume more or less energy? Using these graphs, we can then start to size equipment. So on the red graph, the gas graph, we can start to size a heat pump system. So although you can see the peak heat load is around 750 kilowatts, we can say that 80% of that load can be served by a 300 kilowatt heat pump. So rather than putting in a 750 kilowatt heat pump, which with the cost and the space and the planning permission around such a big heat pump, we can actually put in a much smaller heat pump but still do 80% of the load. And this graph allows us to just play tunes with the size of the heat pump. So we might go to a 250 kilowatt heat pump and still do 70% of the load, or a 350 kilowatt heat pump might do 85% of the load. So that's what we're really looking for here is accurate and well-sized equipment, because we're conscious of capex. And then on the solar side, they've got a 310 kilowatt peak load, but we know that 270 kilowatt solar array do maybe 95% of the load, the existing load through the year. So we would, again, looking at roof space, it might be that for roof space we can only do 270, but it'll still do the vast majority of the electrical load. So that just gives us our base load, our baseline. It's a really good springboard for then what comes next. We understand how the building works and we can build from that. Is that me?
I can.
Am I doing this one?
I'll tee it up, Laura, for you if you want. Just
okay,
to go.
Fine.
So, great, thank you, Laura. So, obviously, once you've got the baseline across the gas and electricity, and now you've sized the heat pumps, what is the next stage in development to showcase the clients of the benefits?
Yep. Well, there's a school of thought that says if you want to fully decarbonise, put in the maximum size of heat pump, get rid of your gas straight away. That's absolutely brilliant, and that obviously from a decarbonisation point of view, that's where we should be going. From a cost point of view, as I said before, a 300 kilowatt heat pump might do 80% of your load, but it might cost half a slightly bigger heat pump to do slightly more of the load. So what we're looking for here was we can say, well, 300 kilowatts heat pump, bivalent heating, which means that we're still keeping a bit of gas. It'll do 80% of the load, so offset 80% of the carbon on the heating side. But you're keeping your gas boiler just to do that remaining 20%. So we're saving 500 tonnes of carbon here per year by putting in a 300 kilowatt heat pump, but we're still keeping a little bit of gas. And again, it's sort of that playing tunes with what's the best thing to do. This is a hybrid bivalent system. So what we're seeing here is the fuel source shift. We're going from, say, 100% gas to actually much less gas with a heat pump, but you're increasing your electricity a little bit. And here is just the optimization of system. You know, what size of heat pump, what size of solar array, how much are you generating yourself, how much are you consuming yourself in terms of electricity. And we will, here at HyGrid, we will run this model iteratively until we come up with a solution that A, saves as much carbon as we can, but B, costs just the right amount. So in terms of capex and opex, it's just the right amount. So that's what this graph is sort of showing here in terms of moving away from gas to an electrified heating system and increasing solar generation on site to offset the additional running costs of that heat pump.
So moving on, obviously we've talked about the technology sides of the assessments and then the environmental impact that this had. So we obviously said, like, if we had a 80% a heat pump that provided 8% of the peak loads, it would provide 500 tons of carbon savings per year. With that, we do understand, and like I said right at the start of the presentation, we do incorporate 3 pillars of technology, environment, and finance. So obviously the financial implications of this are very important. As we understand, it is not a cheap process to deliver these initiatives or these projects. What we do with this economic modelling is we normally model things over a 20-year period, sometimes up to 30-year period, depending on the site. But with this, we've had a look at if a client decides to go down this route, what it would cost and what the payback would be over a period of time. Now, this graph on the right is obviously the cash flow, adjusted annual project cash, which would accumulate to about 113,000 per year, a 30-year average annual saving, 113,000, I should say. But with this also requires a capex investment of 1.2 million to install the heat pump and the additional solar array. The payback on this would be 10.6 years, but we understand from a point of view of this is when we presented this back to the client, it's very difficult then to go above board to get this signed off, because this is not the only operational costs that are going on in these sites. So from there, we've had a look at some options that the client could, pathways they could go down. So Ginny, if you could just go into the next one. So pathways explored. So this is one of the pathways we've explored and presented back to the client. And this, to give a bit of context, is if they had a completely fresh site that had no solar that was already installed on the site. So because we were dealing with a multi-site operation that has, like I said, a lot of different sites across the country, we sort of presented an idea of if they went down the route of a PPA route or a energy as a service route, with no upfront capital, and implemented across one of their sites or multiple of their sites, this is the pathway that they could do. So what this would entail is install a fresh solar and heat pump. The power of the solar would be sold back to them as at 18.5 pence per kilowatt. The heat would still remain at about 3.5 pence per kilowatt. And as I said, just integrate the technology of solar and heat pumps. With this, they would then look at a 52% carbon reduction. And then on the back of that, because they have no upfront capital and no payback period for this, they have no investment that they're putting into this, the client would be saving an annual average of £30,000 per year. Now, most people would go, oh, we're on the scale of a 600,000 per year, say, annual energy cost. Is that going to be a huge difference to a site and their operations? We would argue yes, because of this client that we were speaking to is a multi-site operation. So if we said 20 to 30 sites that could roll out this proposition £30,000 per site then does equate to a large amount, plus a large amount of carbon savings across the whole estate. With the client, we obviously explored many pathways. Obviously, the upfront capital expenditure, as discussed, of 1.2 million. But we also then knew that that wouldn't be an attractive or feasible way forward for them. So what we have done is a model, or explored an option of a PPA, or energy as a service. Now, those who are unaware of a PPA and energy as a service, this is a service that providers provide the installations, design and installations of renewable technologies without any upfront capital. So when the solar and heat pumps are installed on the site, the client where it is installed basically buys the energy from the provider. This means the provider can then sell the energy back to them at a cheaper rate than the grid, thus reducing their energy costs and thus reducing their increasing their carbon savings, I should say. So with this client, we then discussed there was two options that we could have gone down. Obviously, the site that we looked at had solar on it already. What we have done for them is, because they're a multi-site operation and looked across the country, is to show them what a fresh site would look like. So that would be installing integrated technology of solar and heat pumps. We'd be selling back the power to them, the electricity power back to them at 18.5 pence, so lower than the grid price. The heat would stay at 3.5 pence on average. And as I said, we'd integrate the different technologies. With this, we've modeled that the site at one individual site would save around 52% in carbon per year, and on an annual average would save £30,000 a year on energy costs. Now, as we spoke about the complex project at the start, where they do have an expenditure of around 600,000+ a year on their energy costs, 30,000 might not seem a huge amount. But if we look at it from the picture that they are a multi-site operation, and if you are a multi-site operator yourself, this 30,000 then would get times by 20 to 30 different sites if this was rolled out across the whole portfolio, which would then equate to a huge amount of savings for the organisation. Funding options, as discussed, that is just one option to go down with the PPA route. There are many different funding options, and High Group does specialise in navigating these pathways for clients. What we would like to talk about, because obviously there is a huge amount of array that you could look into and discuss, and there's lots of nuances to different things. We just recommend these three areas that you need to focus on that will help you get to the funding or get you to where you need to get to in this thing. So it's planning with confidence. So as we discussed there, it's establishing and building a robust business case that opens doors to diverse funding. It's exploring all routes, as discussed there. So we've obviously looked at what a client could do with an upfront capital or different funding or PPA models. And then it's also unlocking our ambition. So detailed feasibility work maximizes funding opportunities. We'll go on to a little bit more detail of why the feasibility is so important at this stage. But as Laura's just said there, with the Quick Wins project, that initially it was to go in straight away with a heat pump, but straight away we did a feasibility, found some quick wins that sorted annual savings, 33% reduction in energy gas consumption. Feasibility that we won't be doing with the multi-site operator, where we can see a bivalent system would be the most operational and economically beneficial route forward for them. So there's lots of different ways that we can look at this, and there is also lots of different funding routes to go through. So a driving consistent theme that has been throughout this conversation that we've had is data and your visibility on your data, what's operating within your systems, the inefficiencies in the systems. So Laura, could you run us through what monitoring, reporting and verification is?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. So MRV, monitoring, reporting and verification, it's something that's missing from a lot of decarbonisation projects, and actually not just decarb projects, but generally heating, power projects altogether. And it comes back to this: if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So if you have a view that you're spending too much on your gas bill or your electric bill, but you don't actually have the data behind it, it's just a feeling, and it stays a feeling. You can't actually do anything about it. So what we're saying here is meter it better, monitor it, report on it, and verify then that your feeling or your hunch basically is correct. So what we're trying to do here is track data usage, and it's useful in so many different ways. It's useful in terms of sizing equipment, as we've already seen earlier on. So if you're going to put in a heat pump, you want to make sure that it's the right size because that's going to control the capex of the project. So use data for that. You can then look at what's going on after you've installed said heat pump and make sure that it is doing what you thought it was going to do. So it's that link between the ambition and what's actually going on in reality. And we sometimes refer to that as the performance gap as well. And that is, as I say, that is evident in so many different projects that we see. So if you just go on to the next slide, Ginny, please. So why do we need it? We've talked about energy tracking. So this is as simple as putting a meter on a particular gas boiler, or it's putting a meter on a heat pump electricity consumption and generation, or putting a meter on your solar array so you can actually see how much you're generating. So you're continuously monitoring that. You're looking at energy consumption patterns. You're looking at actually things are on or off, or are they actually doing way more than they should be doing or way less than they should be doing. So that's when we're verifying then, making sure that the energy data is accurate and that it's complete and correct. We can then analyze that for all different reasons already talked about, sizing heat pumps, sizing solar arrays, making sure that things are delivering on investment, and then also optimizing that. So if you are seeing your heat pump, so let's talk about heat pumps actually, because when you're going to an electric heating system, they can cost a lot more than gas, as we've already talked about. Therefore, you want your heat pump to be working as efficiently as it possibly can do. So if you know how much electricity the heat pump is consuming versus how much heat the heat pump is generating, you want that difference to be at least 3. So you want 3 times more heat being generated than electricity going in. If it's less than 3, you're going to be spending a lot of money on running your heat pump. If you're not monitoring that, you can't know what's going on, and you certainly can't optimize that. So if you're then monitoring that, you're saying, okay, actually I'm seeing a ratio of electricity to heat conversion of 2, it's 200% efficient. That's not good because your electricity bill is going to be really high, but you can do something about it then. If you don't know, if you're not measuring it, you can't change it. You can't optimize it. So at least you can then look in, well, am I running my heat pump at too high a temperature? Is my heat pump running at when it shouldn't be, because it's actually running when the electricity tariffs are really high? So at home, I've got a heat pump. I want it to run during the night. It fills up my hot water cylinder at night. I want it to be doing that because I'm only paying 7p at night for electricity. I do not want to be running my heat pump during the day because it's going to cost me a lot of money. But if I didn't have metering, I wouldn't be able to see that at all. So we can optimize that but without MRV, you can't do any of that. So the way that High Group then makes this work is we'll come and survey what you're doing. So this could be as part of a wider feasibility, or it could be something just standalone. We'll come and have a look and see what equipment you've got in, what boilers, heat pumps, solar, electric boilers, immersion heaters, whatever it is you've got in. And we'll say, right, these are the meters that we think you need to monitor what's going on with your system and to pinpoint these areas for energy reduction or optimization. And it actually might be a temporary solution. So it might be that we just put in a temporary clamp on meter just for 2 weeks or something, just to see what's going on. So it doesn't have to be intrusive, cutting pipes, cutting cables, stopping everything working while you have a day's downtime where you fit meters. It doesn't have to be that way at all. Then we will go away, gather data for a period of time. It might be a day, it might be a week, a month, ideally 1 year, but sometimes you just don't have that luxury. So we'd actually collect data for a specific period of time and validate that against maybe your utility bills, for example, to make sure that the data is accurate. Baseline what you've got going on right now in terms of energy consumption, as we saw right the way at the back, that baseline of this is where you're at right now versus where you will be. Can't overestimate how important that is. Analyze it, calculate it, use it for heat pump sizing, solar sizing, assessing areas where you could actually make savings without doing anything else. And I'll talk about that later on as well, about opportunities to do that. Report, so we would then report that in a way that is really easy to understand in a specific Word or PDF document, which we give back to you to say, here's the areas that you can optimize on. And we then continuously do that. So we could, let's say that you've hired a clamp on meter for 2 weeks. You might actually find that it's so useful that you keep it for 4 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, or you might then say, do you know what, I need a permanent meter in here. So then plan in to get a permanent meter and just continuously monitor things there. Okay, next slide. So what you can do, we've talked about this a little bit already, is the reality versus the forecast. So you have a feasibility study done that says your heat pump's going to save you 50 tonnes of carbon in year one, and it's going to cost you an extra £10 a year. 1 year down the line, you can actually be monitoring that and say, well, actually, I've saved 2 tonnes of carbon and it's costing me £5 million more a year. This is an extreme example, but without monitoring it, without MRV, you just can't check on that. You can't see. You can just get your electricity bill at the end of the month and think, wow, I'm spending more than I thought. But without MRV, you just can't drill into that and find out why. We have our own portal here at High Group. It's called HIPAA. As a client of ours, you would be given access into the portal, which you can see there in the middle of the screen. That's what it looks like. You can look at your hourly consumption, your hourly generation. You can look at it as carbon, kilowatt hours, or cost. And you can compare it with previous years, previous months, previous weeks. It gives you all kinds of data. And if you're into data like I am, then you might find that you go down a bit of a rabbit hole every day and start looking at this all the time. But yeah, you can troubleshoot. So we had a particular client who, when we started analysing their data, we found that they were running their gas boilers on a Sunday night for about 3 hours full blast. There might have been a reason for that, but when we actually presented them with the data, they just said, oh no, we don't need that to happen at all. Let's have a look at it. Let's switch the gas boilers off. They were able to save 9 megawatt hours, something like 3 megawatt hours a week, basically, of gas just by switching the gas boilers off, because they were running at a time when they had no idea why. They didn't know it was happening. They didn't need it to happen. They switched it off. There was no impact on the building, but there was a huge impact on the bill. But without having that optimization MRV in place, they would never have known that. And finally, it's all about accurate sizing. We saw a bit at the beginning how to size a heat pump. You've got a 750 kilowatt peak load. 300 kilowatt heat pump would do 80% at least of the heat demand. But without knowing that, you might find that somebody comes into your plant room, they look at your boilers, you've got 1 megawatt of boiler in, and they say, well, you need a 1 megawatt heat pump, when actually you might only need 300 kilowatts of heat pump. And we see this all the time. So having that data there just enables you to get your system sized accurately to get your capital costs down.
Great, thank you, Laura. So obviously there's been some real world examples from smaller sites, quick wins, to large scale stuff, looking at the data as Laura's just gone through. So this next section is just literally to take away practical steps you can take today and the High Group model that we take forward. So the roadmap to success. This is a model that we work towards throughout all of our projects. The beauty of it is, as High Group, as we are a decarbonisation partner and we sit with a client right through to the end, we can tailor and fit ourselves into any of these stages throughout the process. So as Laura's just said, we could even come in and monitor your performance and optimize your systems if they're already installed and find out ways to improve things. Or if you are on this call, or if you are on this webinar to have a listen to right from the start, we can work with you right from the very beginning. So decarbonisation discovery plan, and work through. It's a structured evidence-led framework designed for live operation complexity. So we really understand the different sites that are all individual and the processes that need to take place to implement any strategies or design and installs moving forward. So step one, discovery. Do we know what the problem we're solving? So many estates start with technology before clarity. So as Laura suggested there, a lot of people want the messages to get off gas, to get a heat pump in, to install some solar. But what we need to do here is, what is the ambitions of the site? What do we want to achieve? Are everyone aligned with that? Is the established ambition scope baseline, and discover all these scope baseline and constraints very early, so we can really deliver a decarbonisation plan that's going to be effective moving forward. Next slide. Step two is feasibility and strategy. Now, this is such an integral part to the process, as Laura has already stipulated a number of times. For instance, we go back to the Quick Wins Hydrotherapy Centre, where the initial thing was to install a heat pump, which is going to head in the future. But this feasibility work of understanding, are we confident this will actually work here? So as Laura's found with these site surveys, data analysis, the heat pump wasn't actually the the immediate thing to solve. It was the inefficiencies within the building and within the operating systems. Within this feasibility and strategy, it's important then to understand, as we've gone through, the correct sizing of heat pumps or correct solar arrays, so that we are, as we've already said, incorporating the 3 pillars of technology, environment and finance, and that everything is viable moving forward, that everything that we put down as a concept design will be then a success later on in the project. Laura, I'll hand over to you, as this is your expertise, but for design and finance readiness.
Yep. So although I'm an engineer and I love the whole design and feasibility side of things, the technical side, this really does come down to finance. So you could design the best system in the world that's going to cut your carbon footprint down to nothing, but it could cost you more than you could possibly ever afford in terms of the capital cost, the operational cost. So this is really where we have to come up with a technical solution and an economic solution, and they have to come together. So you can go and talk to sort of the estates team of a hotel and give them a technical solution, but ultimately it's going to come down to the person with the money. So it's usually the chief finance officer or that kind of person who's going to be making the decisions on financing the project. So we start with the technical, then we do the finances, and then we'll keep tweaking that technical solution until we come to something that is going to make financial sense. And if it doesn't make financial sense, it doesn't mean that the project's going to die, but it does mean that we can work towards something. We can put things in place, and people may just agree that they're happy to spend more to decarbonise, but certainly from our point of view, we'll always do a techno-economic feasibility study, including that business case run over 20 or 30 years, and we will look at whether you as a client are going to fund that and what the impact is for you then on your bills versus, say, someone like High Group coming along and funding it on a PPA or an energy as a service project, and then what that looks like in terms of your bills as well. So at this point, you would then get the techno-economic study, which balances the two together, the technical with the finance.
So step 4, delivery. Do you want to do this one, Laura? You good? Because your delivery.
Can do. I can carry on. That's fine.
Yeah.
So step 4 is all about the delivery and quality assurance. So High Group, we're not installers, but we do stand alongside our clients in terms of representing them when an installer has been appointed. We will always look at how we can deliver this. So during the feasibility study, during the detailed design piece, we will always look at how can we install this without disrupting the day-to-day activity. So, we don't want to be coming in and saying, you need to shut the hotel down for a month while we get this system installed, because we know that's not reality. So we will work with you as a client to say, are there particular times where it's more possible to maybe take some boilers offline and to put a heat pump in, or to get up on the roof to put some solar up there. So we will do that very early on with you, looking at the risks, creating a risk register all around the delivery side of things, and making sure that that's all put in place before whoever it is you're going to appoint to install gets on site, and then working alongside between you and the installer to make sure that what we've designed is being installed, because that's sometimes a big gap. We send in a pack of drawings, and then when you find that what's actually been designed is not what's gone in, and that can be a problem. But also the fact that all the things that we've identified with you in terms of downtime, access to site, taking equipment offline, that is passed very clearly into the person that's installing it, to make sure that there's not that drop off between them. You suddenly find that you've got no hot water because we've took all the boilers offline on a very important day. So that's where we come in as well. So we just work across the piece to make sure that doesn't happen.
And step 5, performance and optimization. So as Laura's already run through with the MRV slides, this is to show how do we prove the outcome. So it's showing the viability right from that initial feasibility study, concept design to detailed design. And as Laura's just said, that quality assurance that the designs that have been made are being installed to the correct specifications. So this part of this stage is to prove the viability of the project and the ongoing performance of the installations. Just a note with the performance and optimization, this stage 5, this, as Laura has said, can come in at an earlier stage to get visibility on your data, to look at the system, how it's operating currently, and to see if there's any improvements that could be made quickly to reduce operational costs. So just to give a little summary, practical steps to get projects moving. So initially we need to align organizational goals and align this with realistic outcomes, establish baselines and strategies. So that's establishing your carbon, establishing your energy baseline. That will then feed all the feasibility to work out the best and most viable route forwards. As said there, so building options and as we've talked about many times during this presentation, integrating technology, finance and economics to build out the most viable route forwards. What we do then is if there's a project that we built out a more complex business case, deliver detailed design and installation for excellent outcomes. As we've always had a running tone throughout this whole presentation, data is so important through all of this. So apply MRV to validate impact, and then also build trust and understand that this can be a replicated thing across multi-site operations moving forward. So thank you for listening. I hope you can take many things away from this that will be valuable to you moving forward. If you are interested in getting in contact with us to see if we can help your organization with your decarbonisation efforts, please feel free to reach out via the email or number below. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.